Beast got from Hiram Clark. Beast got from Hiram Clark. Beast got from Hiram Clark.
All right, y'all. B Block Podcast. Brandon Scott here with y'all. Got a couple of things that I want to touch on today. Actually went to the Houston Sports Awards last night. Had a really good time. They had it at the 713 Music Hall. First time that they had it there. I was interested to see how that was actually going to go, what that was going to look like. I thought it was beautiful. Thought it was really good. I didn't stick around for as long as I would have liked to, but I definitely want to touch on that briefly. They inducted some really cool figures into the Houston Sports Hall of Fame, which they always do, have for a while. And it was a different experience for me as well. So I want to talk about that for a little bit. And I also spoke with John McClain at the Houston Sports Award, and there's some John McClain news out there that I think I can responsibly talk about here on this podcast. And John is an amazing figure and a just a really great, first of all, an institution, and really just a great person to have in your corner and to know. And so it's an honor to know John. I want to talk about him a little bit, since I did see him at the Houston Sports Awards, and there's some John McClain news out there. But before we do that, and I don't want to spend too much time, hopefully 5 to 10 minutes on each one of these topics. I say 5 minutes because that's the ideal amount of time, and I give myself room for 10 minutes just in case, because the older I get, the more I realize that I am just of the black church and can get long-winded. It's just a thing that I do, a part of me. So I got to give myself that extra couple of minutes. And thankfully, we're on the podcast platform to where we can do such a thing. But the first thing I want to talk about before I get into the Houston Sports Awards, before I start talking about John McClain and all of that stuff, is the actual sports news of the day from Tuesday was Bobby Slowik finding out that Texans offensive coordinator Bobby Slowik and quarterbacks coach Jerrod Johnson would both be staying with Houston. Now, this is significant because both of them had taken, at least you could say, multiple interviews with other teams for jobs that would be promotions, effectively, like for Bobby Slowik going from offensive coordinator to interviewing for head coaching jobs, and then Jerrod Johnson interviewing as a quarterbacks coach, interviewing for offensive coordinator jobs. So the news is that, at least Bobby for sure, the news is that he got a new deal, and I imagine that it's the same thing for Jerrod, that they got pay raises to stay, since they were at least in some sort of demand, and rightfully so, due to the success that the Texans had, specifically on offense, specifically with C.J. Stroud. Like, all of it made sense, and it's a good sign, right? It's a good thing for the Texans that they would have coaches that perform to the point that they are sought after elsewhere, in places that are trying to perform in the way that your team just performed. So, like, it is, like, obviously the wins and losses, and the fact that they were, in the playoffs to begin with, won the division, won a wild card game, played in the divisional round, tied until the halftime against Baltimore, and all of that. Like, all of that speaks for itself. But this is like the remnants of that. Okay, so they're good. So now we want their coaches. All of that is a good thing. But the news is that both of them are staying after interviewing elsewhere, and I think it's fairly significant. But it is one of those stories that I'll admit that I kind of downplayed what it would mean if these guys had left the building, and that's simply because I think that the core of this is, CJ Stroud and D'Amico Ryans as your quarterback head coach combination. The fact that you've got these centerpieces on defense, I feel like you're in good shape, that you should be able to find, if you needed to, you should be able to find adequate replacements for offensive coordinator and or quarterback coach to pair with the infrastructure that's already in place, with D'Amico Ryans as the head coach and CJ Stroud as the quarterback. Like, I did not feel like that should be the hardest thing in the world. even though I didn't want to minimize the significance of what Bobby Slowik and Jerrod Johnson have done in their respective roles. Now, fortunately, that's not going to be an issue, and I will concede that, hey, while I may have somewhat downplayed the significance of losing those guys, I will not downplay the significance of keeping, right, of being able to keep those guys around. I think it's obviously a big deal for continuity with CJ Stroud, being able to build off of what they did last year. Like, I think some of those are just like some obvious points of, hey, it's good to run it back with what was successful, with what we did think we did well, which was, you know, run a really good offense, or at least a good passing offense, right? And and coach the quarterback up, the rookie quarterback up, who, also, I guess, also the news of the day was that CJ Stroud was going to the Pro Bowl. That wasn't as significant to me, because CJ Stroud, he had already passed. Stroud had already passed the Pro Bowl, even All Pro eye test, right? To where and look, I'm going to talk about the Houston Sports Awards in a minute, and folks being inducted into a Hall of Fame, but I'm not the biggest awards guy, especially these days. But he had already, for me, passed like sort of this threshold of, this is a Pro Bowler, this is an All Pro type of talent, type of guy, whether he got those awards or not. So that piece of news wasn't necessarily as significant to me from the day, but it does speak to why Bobby Slowik and Jerrod Johnson were in such high demand, and why the Texans would pay a little extra to keep those guys around. It speaks to the work that they did, and you want to credit those guys for the work that they did. And I do think it's significant to keep that continuity there, and to build off of what they had. Now, my thing with a couple of things with keeping both of them, or them both staying, I should say, because it wasn't a matter of keeping them, or if you wanted to keep them, it's a matter of if they would stay, right? Of being able to keep them, I should say. I immediately went from the celebratory, hey, the continuity's there. Let's build off all of the points that I just made, right? Let's build off of year one. Let's run it back and do it again, and celebrating that these guys are coming back. I immediately moved off of that and went to all right, so what's that run game gonna look like? Are they gonna how is Bobby Slowik primarily going to scheme up a run game next year? What are they gonna do about this? Because this has been the conversation that we've been having about the Texans ever since they lost to the Baltimore Ravens in the divisional round now, almost a couple of weeks ago. All right, they got the quarterback. They got some really nice pieces on defense. They got a head coach who is an elite leader and an elite defensive mind. All right. So you got a lot of things going for yourself. It's a couple of things that you don't have, right? And that is a run game that you can rely on in January once you make it there. Because you do realize that you got a team, you got a quarterback, you got a squad that can get you to January. You don't feel like you got a run game that can get you much past where you got, right? Because you weren't able to run the ball effectively in the divisional round against the Ravens when you really needed to. And there are some uncomfortable conversations to have about that, personnel-wise, perhaps schematically, perhaps how they coach it. Like there are some uncomfortable conversations they're going to have both about the offensive line and their running back personnel, considering that, Dameon Pierce is the only guy they got coming back really of significance, you would say. And they got to address the whole thing, personnel, the way we call it, the way we coach it, all of that, So how is that going to go in year two from a Texan standpoint? Never mind Bobby Slowik, because we understand now that Bobby Slowik's not going to sneak up on anybody now the way maybe he did as an offensive coordinator candidate under DeMeco Ryans for some folks, right? Like maybe you hadn't heard of him or didn't realize that he was on this kind of rise, on this kind of trajectory, I would say. But now certainly you do with these head coaching interviews. All right, so good for him. Now that he's back with the Texans, now that he's going to be doing this again, I want to see what the evolution is in the Texans offense after. I don't even want to call it overachieving because I don't think we could adequately have like expectations or like an understanding for what these guys were capable of just because we had never seen any of them do it before. But now that we do have that, what's the evolution of that? Like we've got enough of Texans off, enough of Bobby Slowik, enough of CJ Stroud telling us the impact of Bobby Slowik and Jerrod Johnson on him as a football player, on him as a specifically with Jerrod, on him as a guy and his really I would say more so his confidence in himself, kind of being one of the first people of significance, of importance to put that confidence in him or to encourage him to be confident before necessarily it was time. He's talked about this, right? Like Jerrod Johnson being early on CJ Stroud saying, hey man, be confident even before it was necessarily time for CJ Stroud to necessarily be that confident, right? If that makes sense. You know, so like the significance of that, cool. Evolution of the offense. Evolution of the offense. What does Nick Caserio and D'Amico Ryans, what do they do? What do they do to address the issues in the run game? So when you get late in the season and you already know you got a quarterback that can carry, you also are able to run the football. Like the Baltimore Ravens against the Texans were able to run the football. The Baltimore Ravens against the Kansas City Chiefs, for whatever reason, what is the criticism of how they approached that game? Not that they couldn't run the football, but they for some reason didn't and stopped, didn't try enough. So like that's clearly something that they need to do. That's kind of like the thing that I'm waiting for now that I know that these guys are coming back. I don't I said this, I was thinking about this earlier, man. Like Jerrod Johnson, he's sitting back in the cut and just like, CJ Stroud is good. Jerrod already had a really good reputation, I think, around the league, and new people around the league. But his reputation to go along with what CJ Stroud is out there doing, hey man, he is kind of able to kind of ride this wave. I thought this made a lot of sense for both of them once it became clear, okay, that Jim Harbaugh was going to get that job with the Chargers, and that was I think objectively, I can't say. I guess I can't say I think objectively because if it's my opinion, then it's subjective. Maybe you could disagree, but I think there's a strong case to be made to say that the Chargers job was the best job that was available because it was the only one that for sure had the franchise quarterback. Especially once the Bears decided they were going to keep Matt Eberflus, and there wasn't going to be a reset, a total reset in Chicago of get rid of the head coach, get rid of the quarterback, and bring in a new coach with Caleb Williams, them having the number one pick. Like once that wasn't in play, and it was more of okay, the next picks with Washington, which has been a franchise that's on the upstart, I would say, after the change of ownership from Dan Snyder now to Josh Harris and I don't know, like it feels like the shine on that Washington brand is just really I mean, maybe this goes without saying that that there is no more shine on that. Like that's kind of a franchise that people seem to avoid or would want to avoid. Like once that Chicago possibility was not there, and it seems like I guess it just was never there because they were pretty early on saying that they would keep Matt Eberflus. The best job was clearly, I think, the Chargers job, and past that, like how desperately do you want one of these other jobs if you feel like you what you're doing right now is good enough to keep you in the conversation for a job next year that might be better? Like I think this was kind of the right move if they are in a position to be patient about it. Like the part about this conversation that always fascinated me was like, is Bobby Slowik ready to be a head coach? Maybe he needs to do another year if he's ready. Maybe he's not ready. I don't think it's much about being ready as it is the moment being right, the timing being right. Like, it's less about his individual readiness and more about everything aligning about the situation and the timing of it and how he feels about it. And if money is however much money is an issue, well, there you go. The team steps up and says, all right, well, here's what we'll pay you to keep you here. And that's again a credit to the work that you're doing, that your employer will step up and pay you to keep you around, pay a little extra to keep you around. So yeah, no, it really fascinates me how things worked out more so in this head coaching market with elsewhere. Like the stories that nobody is talking about is like how Eric Bieniemy, there is an opening where Eric Bieniemy works. Okay. And we talk about the shine not being there anymore. And I can't figure this out for the life of me. It's odd. Eric Bieniemy went to Washington and became their offensive coordinator with the idea of, hey, let's get out of Andy Reid's shadow. Let's do, even though I've been running Andy Reid's offense, let's maybe just take Andy Reid's offense over to Washington and my version of Andy Reid's offense over to Washington and show everybody I can be my own man, do my own thing, and maybe there's a head coaching job for me around the corner, right? Like that was the lot. Everybody figured that's what the logic was for Eric Bieniemy in leaving Kansas City so he could get out of Andy Reid's shadow. He goes over there, does that. Now they have a rough end of the 2023 season. There's no way around it. But for a time there, Sam Howell was like leading the league in passing, and Washington's offense at the very least was like surprisingly good for a stretch there at least. I'm not saying that he did I didn't watch enough to be like, hey, he did a great job or anything like that. But I do know that when I would look up passing stats, Sam Howell for the first, I don't know, 6 weeks or 7, I don't know how long it was before a stretch there, Sam Howell was up there. And I was like, man, what the hell's going on over here? Y'all explain that to me however you want to. But it is odd to me that he went there, Eric Bieniemy did, went there with the idea that he could become a head coach if things went well. They did not go well enough for him to even remain in the conversation for head coach. You don't hear nothing about nobody trying to talk to Eric Bieniemy about a head coaching job. Nothing about it. Bobby Slowik got about 5 interviews. And y'all hadn't heard most of y'all, unless you were a San Francisco 49ers fan, or if you were familiar with his father's work, Bob Slowik, or a historian in that way, you know what the Shenanigans and Slowiks are about. Then maybe you knew about him a little bit, but he was not nobody's household name for head coaching jobs until just now. And he gets 5 interviews, and you look up and Bieniemy's not in nobody's conversation anymore. It is wild how quickly things can turn, and how even that idea itself didn't manifest. Like the idea that he could go out, be his own man, and then be out there in the conversation. So much to the point that even where he went to work, they fired the head coach, the defensive head coach, and Ron Rivera. They have an opportunity with a top pick to draft a quarterback, and they've got an offensive coach on staff who they could just promote to be their head coach and be the guy, since he's the guy that worked with Patrick Mahomes and he's the guy that worked with Andy Reid, right? Like they got a guy that should be able to take that over, and there doesn't seem to be a clear view of him of that at all. Any kind of view of him of that, or as that, I should say, at all. Like he got what seems like a courtesy interview with the team, and everything after that. And maybe by the time this podcast publishes, Washington will have hired a head coach, or maybe haven't seen the news or whatever. But we saw Ben Johnson say, "I'm going back to Detroit." And we saw Bobby Slowik say, "I'm going back to Houston." And those were the best candidates, at least offensive candidates left. You know, I'm seeing here as I'm recording now that Seattle's going to hire Mike McDonald, Ravens defensive coordinator. So they part ways with Pete Carroll, at least as head coach, to hire another defensive minded guy, another defensive coach, and Mike McDonald. Ravens defensive coordinator. So that job is wrapped up as I'm recording this right here. But yeah, I mean the Washington thing and the Eric Bieniemy parallel as well. Like Washington as its own spectacle is fascinating. Like how they're trying to rebrand and who all wants to go there and what your career what it says about your career to go there. Where these two candidates didn't see it, like didn't see the vision. And we're like, yeah, I'd rather go back and coach the the offense that I'm already coaching right now that I know that works and wait for one of those jobs that looks more like the one that Jim Harbaugh took, where there's a quarterback. Because I at least have one right now as an offensive coordinator. I'd rather have a quarterback as an offensive coordinator than not have one as a head coach. I trust the organization that I'm in, as opposed to the question mark that is this, new wave, new regime that you got going on there in Washington. Fascinating. And then again with Bieniemy, from a lot of buzz and a lot of question marks about why this guy isn't a head coach to where or why this guy hasn't even really gotten a look or has gotten so many looks and has still not gotten a job, I should say, to just like seemingly disappearing from the conversation. Incredible to watch. Incredible to watch. And I don't have the answers, like I know there's been a lot of talk about how he interviews and how he comes across and whether his personality is one that meshes right with the majority of ownerships that that think about the branding of the franchise, and this being somebody that's going to talk multiple times a week on behalf of the franchise. Can this be, all of that, whatever. But it is just wild to see. Wild to see that this is what it's turned into. That like Bobby Slowik is in a position to say no thanks to the job, and Eric Bieniemy can't get them to like go beyond like the courtesy interview. Kind of wild to me, but overall for the Texans, this is good. Run it back with the offense, but y'all got to figure out this run game personnel wise. Again, how you coach it, how you call it, and yeah, man. So want to see what the running back's going to look like, what that running back room going to look like for the Texans, and definitely want to see what that offensive line is going to look like once Titus Howard is healthy at right tackle, once Kenyon Green is healthy at left guard, and then what the competition is at that position, what the competition is at the center position. You presume or assume that Juice Scruggs is going to get the nod at center, but who's your center? Who's your left guard? And Titus Howard back at right tackle. What's the difference going to look like? Plus the running back personnel. Fascinated to see, like, how does that change how Bobby Slowik's able to call a game? How does that change how they're able to execute a run game late in the season? All right, so I think it's important for me to hit this other topic before I hit the last one, because we want to talk about the Houston Sports Awards, which I mentioned earlier in the show. But before I do that, John McClain, who I did see at the Houston Sports Awards, I mentioned that earlier, did see John McClain at the Houston Sports Awards. He announced on X, formerly known as Twitter, on Wednesday morning, he announced that he had been laid off from SportsRadio 16. Now, I had heard from John. He sent me a text the day before. Right? What is this? So the day before, send me a text on Tuesday telling me that he had been laid off. And then I saw him at the Houston Sports Awards and talked to him briefly about it. For anybody that's listening or watching or paying attention to this that does not know who John McClain is or what the dynamics are, John McClain is a legend. He is one of the greatest sports writers of certainly of my lifetime, and I would say ever. But certainly of my lifetime. And then if you could even just make it very specific to Houston, he's like he would have to be on some sort of Mount Rushmore of Houston sports writers, and I don't want to like have that necessarily have that do that segment, I am partial to Mickey Herskowitz, who I studied under at Sam Houston State, and I'm partial to John McClain, who Mickey Herskowitz first introduced me to, and then who I obviously later worked with. And so the dynamic with John and I is that I've had the honor and fortune of editing John McClain, a Hall of Famer, Pro Football Hall of Famer. 40 years, I don't know, something like 40 years at the Houston Chronicle, just been around forever, an institution in Houston sports media, in NFL media, and just a part of the like overall Houston sports culture, I would say. Like I would say for better and worse, whether you like it or love it, and I just happen to be on the side of liking it because I'm partial to it. I know I was able to, form a relationship with the guy and know the guy personally. But like I understand that John is polarized and everybody is watching or listening to this is not necessarily a John McClain fan. I am here to say that and to be very clear about that. I am flat out point blank period. Like, in a discussion on that. But as far as this McClain thing goes, putting it out there, he's been laid off. I cannot express to you how big of a deal it's been for me personally to work with John McClain, and not just the whole like he's John McClain part of it, like that. Maybe that was part of it in the beginning, but I got like an opportunity to actually get to know John, um, like personally. And I'm not saying like we were like just hanging out at the cookhouse or whatever, but John turned out to be the type of person, and has been this type of person. I hope this continues, um, whether he's working or whatever John is doing, just like until the end of time. John turned out to be the person who would just reach out to you. And I've got a few people like this. A few people like this in the media. I'm not gonna start naming names at this point because I don't want to leave nobody out. But John is among them, and is one of these people in the business, who is not just transactional. Hey, let's do the work. Like he checks on you. Obviously, a lot of you who follow me and who know me know that I've been through a lot over the last year, and I can say with you know with gratitude here that John McClain was somebody who always, always, always checked in. Always. All right. So, it is full circle for me to go from 2009. All right. I mentioned Mickey Herskowitz, who was the Houston Post columnist for, basically forever, long before my time, who later became my professor at Sam Houston State. And I took a sports writing class with Mickey Herskowitz, something like 2009, I believe it was. And the class became a lot of, hey, here are my accolades, here's the way I did it. It became a lot of that, a lot of there was a lot of pom-pomming of the Mickey Herskowitz legacy as part of the class, I will admit, but there was a lot of substance to it as well. And one part of it was meeting John McClain, having McClain come up there and talk to the class. And not everybody in the class was really interested in becoming a sports writer and in sports writing, uh, the genre, let's just say. But I was one of them and took something from it. And, like it was at a point there where basically I didn't necessarily want to be John McClain, but in a lot of ways I did. Like I wanted to do the things that John McClain was doing, writing, appearing on, doing writing for the newspaper, appearing on radio, being on TV when the opportunity pops up. He had done it'd been in movies at that point, all of that kind of stuff. I thought was really cool in how sports writing can open up an opportunity for you to do even more things. John was an example of that. Is and has been an example of that, and was even before long before I knew him and got a chance to know him. So to go from that, being a college student, 15 years ago, studying under Mickey Herskowitz, and even then, like just really learning and realizing the legend that was, and what I was, who I was around, and what I was around with Mickey and even John, who I'd read when I was younger, but just kind of gaining a greater understanding for the business and for what we do. It has been a full circle type of thing to have met him then, when I was just trying to figure out if this was something that I could do. Like I think at that point I knew I wanted to do it, but still trying to figure out if it was something that I really could do. To then, let's call it 10 years later, actually meeting him and being able to work around him, being at Sports Radio 610, him being at Sports Radio 610, but also being at the Chronicle, and like just starting to kind of develop a friendly professional relationship with John, being able to witness John McClain and Mark Berman, guys, like Mark Berman, the famed Fox 26 reporter who retired last year, I guess it was. They had, as legends and institutions both in their own right, they had kind of like this dynamic between them that was both like, there's Berman and there's McClain, but they are also like the best of friends, and have seen more than most of us younger people that are on the beat and are around the media scene now have seen. And so there was just like this connection between the two of them, and observing them, especially as a native here who kind of has an appreciation for what they represent. Coolest thing, really the coolest thing. Kind of beyond just like covering the sports and doing all of that, like like seeing the behind the scenes of what it all really actually looks like, it is really cool. So I like, Mark Berman retired, and he only pops up like as a fan here and there. You don't really see him doing any kind of like real media stuff. Like he's retired for real. John McClain retired from the Houston Chronicle in 2022, I believe it was. And then after that, not long after that, started working on a more regular basis with Sports Radio 610 as a columnist. And that's where we started to work more, as opposed to working side by side. That's where he and I started to work more directly. And I got, again, the honor of editing John McClain. And I'll tell y'all what that experience was like. Okay. Aside from it just being an honor and, cool and all of that stuff, like what it was really like was really like the easiest job that you could possibly have was editing John McClain, especially at this point in his career, because more than likely, whatever he came up with the exception of some tweaking, was going to be about as good as anything else that anybody else was going to come up with at a radio station to write about, right? As being John McClain. So it's like, all right, the copy is clean, the concept works. Maybe the headline might need a little bit of work, but that's what I'm here for as the editor, right? And because writers typically don't write their own headlines. John McClain would submit a headline. Oftentimes, I would go with it. I say, okay, that works. Sometimes it wouldn't work, but that's cool. That's what I'm here for. Clean copy, consistent, right? Reliable. The easiest job I've ever had in my life is editing John McClain. It required little to no work. Little to no work. That's the real. That's the real. The easiest job of my life that I've ever had, and the honor of a lifetime. The honor of a lifetime. I don't care what any of y'all think about John McClain, what none of y'all got to say about John McClain. The people that's listening, that care about this, that understand, know what I do. Okay. Houston sports scene, all y'all, everybody's got an opinion about John McClain. I don't care what you think about the dude. That is my guy. And I'm really sorry to see him go. You know, it is on the business side of it, it is reflective of really just the ever changing, always changing of the business. You know, how the priorities change, the goals change, the emphasis change, the like the focus, I don't know, like all of that can change on a whim, you know, and it's nobody's, I don't think it's anybody's individual fault that this is the way that it is, but it is the way that it is. And honestly, man, it's just hard. Like, I don't want to sound like I'm defending it, because it's disheartening, man. It's unfortunate that it's not enough space for what everybody provides, you know, for what makes everyone valuable, you know. And John McClain, it is wild to think that we've reached a space in our media where you could make a business decision that says that for whatever reason John McClain's not a part of your strategy, you know. And that's what happened here, you know. And I'm not, you know, this is in-house, like kind of like family businesses. I work there and everything, and I'm privy to stuff that, like, man, if I get to start here rattling and running my mouth, I will really sound kind of crazy. But so I'm not gonna do that. But I can say responsibly that I understand what the business aspect was of a radio station. This is how I'll put it, of a radio station in 2024 deciding that it could no longer pay salary to a columnist, right? A radio station deciding that it could no longer pay a salary to a columnist. And man, that's wild to think about, because look, John McClain is intertwined with the Sports Radio 610 brand, right? Knows and has forgotten more about Houston sports than most of us know, right? But the media is moving into a space where they would rather take the money that you could pay somebody like that to do something that is more digitally focused, right? Who knows? Producer money, graphics person's money, the you know what I mean? Like the different things that you could do with the salary that you pay John McClain. You know, that's what I think. I think I'm safe saying, explaining it that way and saying that's what it kind of came down to. But man, it hurts, man. Like I know before I recorded this and after I heard from John and like he texted me and Sean Bajani, who's been at 610 forever as well. And shout out to Sean Bajani, by the way. Sean Bajani and Patrick Creighton have a night show, you know, and this is just the oddity of it all, like how things, you know, flip. Some people get opportunities, some people lose opportunities. But Sean Bajani and Patrick Creighton have a night show on Sports Radio 610 that I do want to plug real quick, from 7 to 10 p.m. That is I said it's a night show, 7 to 10 p.m. Central Time, Area 45. Y'all should check that out on Sports Radio 610. It is also on the Odyssey app, and we are streaming it on, Sports Radio 610's YouTube and Twitch pages. So y'all should check that out for sure. But McClain sent this text message to me and Bajani, just letting us know what was going on. And man, earlier today, even in the moment, like it's like sad. I talked to him later on that night at the Houston Sports Awards, just a pit in my stomach, man. And then this morning when I saw him put it out there on social media, like was really just sad about it, man, because another thing that I would just say about John McClain before I wrap this part of it up, talking about McClain, announcing that he had been let go from 610 is like, man, I don't know anybody that I've come across, anybody that care, and I've come across a lot of people in this business now at this point. I don't think I've come across anybody that cares more about the business than John McClain. I don't know if I know anybody that cares more about the business than John McClain. And, to see him not at the Chronicle anymore, he's retired from the Chronicle and then let go from Sports Radio 610. Like it was sad for me, and made me like a little bit, honestly sad for him, because I know how much he cares about the business. So now I would say, now I'm not going to shed too many tears for John, because if John wants to work, John's going to be able to find work. I am confident in that. There are publications that are down writers, like actual writing publications, not radio stations, but places that need writers that could stand to hire John McClain. That should probably think about it. And I think that they know who they are. I don't necessarily have to call them out. But he is somebody who, if he wants to continue working, and I don't get the sense that he's somebody that has to work if he does not want to. I do get the sense that he's somebody that does want to continue working in some sort of capacity. I do get that sense. But if he wants to work, John McClain is going to find work. I hate that it is no longer going to be directly with me, like what, like I still have a relationship with the guy, but I will miss the story ideas, which again, I mentioned the easiest editing job that you could ask for, because John McClain is going to let you know what he's writing about, and then John McClain is going to write about that. That 100% is how it worked, and I loved it. Enjoyed every moment of it. Will miss it. Maybe again, by it being the easiest job ever, it made my overall job a lot easier. Okay, as the guy who runs Sports Radio 610's digital operation, made my job a lot easier having John McClain content to put out there. So gonna miss working with the guy, but more importantly, am just honored, truly honored to know him. All right, enough all that mushy stuff. I said I was gonna go you know what? It was ridiculous of me earlier to say that I was gonna go 5 to 10 minutes on each one of these topics, knowing damn well that meant I was gonna go 15. And so I should never do that again. That is one note to take. That I'm oversharing a little bit, but making a mental note for the podcast as I bring it back, as we come back to the world on the B Block podcast. Not gonna tell y'all no more that I'm gonna spend 5 or 10 minutes on a thing if I might be inclined to spend 15 on it. All right. But before we get out of here, I do want to talk about the VIP shenanigans at the Houston Sports Awards, because this was a really fun time. And I love what they do at the Houston Sports Awards. There's a conflict for me. I am somehow far less into. I know I just got that talking about John McClain, who is, you know, one of the main voters for the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and just a very influential behind the scenes figure in awards like that, right? But there's some politics behind awards and Hall of Fame that has kind of had me separate from it emotionally or detach from it emotionally. But I am into this, like specifically the honoring of Houston sports legends as they do at the Houston Sports Awards with the Harris County Houston Sports Authority. Hope I said that right. What is it? The Houston Harris County Sports Authority or the Harris County Houston Sports Authority? Whichever one. I think it's the Harris County Houston Sports Authority. Shout out to y'all. Shout out to Daniel Gotera, uh, all of y'all. But this was cool because on this particular night they were honoring. They were inducting into the Hall of Fame Lance Berkman. They did Lance Berkman, Lance Berkman of the Houston Astros fame, and also played at Rice and is coaching, I believe, now at Houston Christian. But so a lot of Houston ties there. Was a great player for the Houston Astros, Lance Berkman, and then there's Cynthia Cooper, the first, like for me, the first like Jordan like figure of the WNBA. The four straight WNBA finals with the Houston Comets. She, I believe, was the MVP, the finals MVP of all of them, if I'm not mistaken, and really the clear best player of that dynasty. And I do consider that to be a dynasty, even though that team is now defunct, if you will. But that the legacy of that should not be. I am glad that they still keep the Comets the Comets banners up at Toyota Center, even though that team has not been around for years now, for well over a decade. But Cynthia Cooper getting her flowers as a Houston sports legend, which I truly believe that she is, and then of course Warren Moon, who for some reason now that they've been doing the sports awards now for about 4 or 5 years, maybe a little bit longer than that, but I know I've been around for about 4 or 5 years at least. And I could have sworn by now, because we've done a lot of interviews with Warren Moon over the last few years, that he was already in there. They got murals, and he's Warren freaking Moon. So I'm like, man, how is it that I've been to like 4 or 5 of these already, and Warren Moon is somehow not already in the Houston Sports Hall of Fame? That didn't register with me at all. But what it was is that he and Andre Ware and Vince Young have this scholarship that they have for athletes in the Houston area that are the product of, I think, a single parent household, or a single mother or single parent, one of those. But it targets that demographic specifically because all of them come from a single parent household, and or were raised by a single mom. And so they wanted to reach out, and they have talked about that and have done some really good work with that since they instituted it several years back. And so I guess for whatever reason, I just combined the fact that Warren Moon is an actual Hall of Famer, like an actual Pro Football Hall of Famer, who's got this scholarship that he shows up for and promotes. And I think they do like a golf tournament. They do all this, kind of cool stuff with it. And so which is tied to the Sports Authority, right? So I just, for whatever reason, just already put him in there. I'm like, Warren, we're just now doing this, just not putting Warren Moon in there. But it was cool. I want to talk about it real quick and get out of here. First off, I was hired by Sports Radio 610 not quite 5 years ago. But this would be, let's go, 21, 2, 3, 4. This is either the fourth or fifth, I think possibly the fifth Houston Sports Awards that I've done. I'm going to go with the fifth. When it first started, in the very, very beginning, I'd go on assignment as like the dude to take pictures and do social media stuff. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like that's awesome. Like as a job, as work, like for that to be work, that's awesome. And it is work, but that's really good work if you can get it. Okay. And so I would do that, but then I would also like be around and kind of look around and see, people who were there just as like VIP and weren't there for work. They were just there because they were invited and they were just like doing, just like enjoying it and just being there. And I just remember thinking, this is like the first one that I did. So I don't know, maybe 4 years ago or so. I remember thinking, man, it'd be really cool to be able to come to one of these things and not really be working. To not really have to do like any kind of work for it. To just like show up, pop up, and enjoy the evening, kind of soak it in. Maybe even like walk the red carpet, take a picture. I don't know, something like that. And progressively, I've been able to have experiences more in line with that. You know, the next year, I want to say I didn't walk the red carpet; I covered the red carpet. As opposed to just like you know running around doing a bunch of different odd and end things. This time, I was covering the red carpet, right? And then after that, got to go in and enjoy it like everybody else, right? So like I've been and I say go in. This year would have been right after the pandemic, so I think we did it outside out there in the woodlands. If you're a Sports Radio 610 listener, um, you might remember that as the year. Yeah, I think that you might remember that as the year that Jim Nance and Ron Hughley, who was a guest on, who I will mention again in a moment, and was also a guest on this show on the last episode. They had a little bit of a misunderstanding, I will say, on the radio. And I don't, man, the boss at the time saw to it that that wasn't something that you could just go find easily. And I was a part of that, making sure that that was the case. So I'm not sure how, if you're not familiar with that, if you can go find that. But that did happen. We play drops from it on Sports Radio 610 at times. But yeah. So fast forward from then to now, I got VIP parking, right? And I've been able to park before, but this was the VIP parking. Just pull right up there. And again, they had it at the 713 Music Hall for the first time. They've had it at different places downtown, the Woodlands, all of that. Or hotels downtown, all of that. But 713 Music Hall / the Post, VIP parking. Just pull up and then just walk that red carpet. Um, get one of those good old VIP wristbands. Take a picture with the official instead of taking a picture. And again, nothing wrong with taking the picture because that's good work if you can get it. But instead of taking the picture, you take a picture as VIP on the red carpet. All right. Walk in, get your wristband, right? Your VIP wristband, all of that. Glass of champagne there for you for the VIP. Walk in the red carpet. Walk the red carpet with your glass of champagne. And then enter into the 713 Music Hall where right there after the red carpet is the on the side there is Sports Radio 610 engineer running the Texans radio. Okay, because that's the time. That's the timeline I just ran into the 6 o'clock hour when I'm getting there. Mark Vandermeer, voice of the Houston Texans, and Cecil Shorts, the voice of the incredible in stadium voice of the Houston Texans, the voice of the in stadium experience. Two really, 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 uh, two guys that are really, really good at what they do. And Mark Vandermeer and Cecil Shorts, who I also know and work with, both of them. Right there, walk in, they see me, and it's I guess the end of their show. Invite me onto the show, impromptu, right there. Just not expecting it, not planned, but there I am, appearing as they are ending their show, and I get invited on the Texans radio. Look, man, that's cool. That is cool because there was a time when I had gotten to Sports Radio 610, when I really, really wanted to be somebody that, not that I just wanted to, like I just had to be on Texans radio per se, but I wanted to be somebody that they might reach out to, right? That somebody they might, be interested in talking to. Wanted to have that kind of credibility. Wanted to be somebody that the TV stations wanted to have on. Wanted to be somebody that the you know different publications that pay for writers wanted to have write for them, right? That kind of thing. And it, like, for me, was a full circle moment of, hey, I've kind of become that, like I'm doing that, you know. And I mentioned before that I've had a really tough year, and you take your dubs where you can, and your losses are those that you deal with as best that you can. But just kind of continue to endure, and I've done that, and I've worked really hard. So I felt good. It was a really good feeling to be there, to be treated the way that I was, and then to do it on a day where, Chris Burke, on a night, I should say, where Chris Burke is introducing Lance Berkman, right? Where Van Chancellor is introducing Cynthia Cooper, where Kevin Gilbride is introducing uh, Warren Moon, right? Uh, where Lance McCullers is the host, where CJ Stroud, who was not there, but he's, you know, winning all the awards that he's nominated for. And Andre Johnson is up there to accept the award on his behalf, right? And he's presenting the awards. Andre Johnson is, like, on a night where all of that has happened. And then John McClain's up there. I don't know if I can't remember if he presented an award, exactly what he was. But he's up there talking because he's John McClain, right? And he's there, right? Talking to him. And it was a tough moment, tough thing to be discussing with him. But obviously, always glad to see him, and good to see him every time I get a chance to, um, which is plenty. But in that setting, also, you know, by the open bar in the VIP section, right? Really cool. Okay, the shenanigans that I want to get to before I get out of here, and I feel like it's safe to do here at the end of the show, because I don't know how many people are still listening. Don't really care, honestly. I love y'all, but this is just as fun for me as it is for you, hopefully. Or hopefully just as fun for you as it is for me, is the way I should put that. But the shenanigans, okay? I mentioned Ron Hughley, who was the guest on this show on the last episode. He and I sat next to each other at this event, and our table, the Sports Radio 610 table, for whatever reason, we actually didn't sit at the Sports Radio 610 table. The table that was ours was behind us, and we sat at a different one. I don't know exactly why that was. I showed up a little bit late, but didn't ask any questions, and it didn't seem to be a problem. So we're at this table that is basically next to the last table on the first floor of the 713 Music Hall. Like, and so we're kind of like we're even, like, to me, out of the camera shot as far back as we are. We're on the first floor. It's VIP, but we're all the way in the back. So we ain't had no problem with this. We actually thought that this was, in some ways, a benefit to us, because it allowed us to cut up a little bit. We could kind of smirk and crack jokes, and basically have a spoof of the award show that was actually happening, having our own award show that is, far less palatable, let's say. Okay. Not something, maybe something that you want to listen to, maybe something that you want to check out, but not exactly something that that either one of us, that Ron or I, would feel good about putting out there, and still having, like, our jobs and our careers and our futures in front of us. Okay. Let's just put it out there and say that. But the fun part of the shenanigans, and I told y'all the fun part of like just being, you know, immersed in all of it and being treated well. But the fun part of the shenanigans is that all three of those figures, Lance Berkman, Cynthia Cooper, and Warren Moon, are, again, to me, iconic figures. Like iconic, specifically Houston sports figures and of my childhood. Like all of them played when I was a kid. Like Berkman talked about whiffing on a fly ball in, I think, left field in the Astrodome in 1999. Right? Okay, so that's right there in my wheelhouse as a kid. Obviously, Coop won those WNBA championships. I think from what was it, from 97 to 2000, right, or whatever it was. Yeah, I think that's right. And then Warren Moon, even before all of that, right? He's product of the 80s and 90s and Hall of Famer. I I B. Scott from Hiram Clark, right? From Windsor Village, specifically in Hiram Clark, right? I'm from the neighborhood, went to the church, and grew up fellowshipping. Okay, did my youth fellowshipping at Moon Hall at Windsor Village. Why was it called Moon Hall? Because my understanding is that Warren Moon donated the money to have the place built. That was always my understanding. His name called Moon Hall, named after Warren Moon. That's where I grew up doing my youth church stuff. And in Moon Hall. It's where you know, all of it, everything. Moon Hall. So like all of these figures mean a lot to me. I think highly of them all. Met Cynthia Cooper as a kid at the Saltgrass in Maryland, which I'm not far from right now. Actually, I'm not gonna say I could throw a rock and hit it, but I'm not far from that Saltgrass right now. Met Cynthia Cooper and the late great Kim Perrott at the Saltgrass in Maryland, which would have had to have been at some point in the late '90s. It was before Kim Perrott was sick, or had before it was known that she was sick. Met them both, just having dinner, and they were very very nice to me as a kid. Signed autograph, all of that. So very cool. Enjoyed all of this, but however, me and Ron Hughley sitting there, known to be about some shenanigans, known to be about some shenanigans, and we had commentary. I'm gonna let y'all. I'm gonna allow for some of y'all to do your own work here, but we had commentary for each one of them on their various controversies, right? And if you just look up all the controversies, none of them are equal. They're all different, okay, on different scales, a level of how they may or may not offend your sensibilities, but each and every one of them has their own. Like if you Google, I imagine, Lance Berkman controversy, a controversy will pop up that you may or may not even view as a controversy. If you Google Cynthia Cooper controversy, a controversy will come up that I think you would agree is a controversy, but you might question its validity or veracity. Okay, perhaps if you are unaware of the credibility of whoever, right? So there's that, and then there's the same thing, I think, uh, but to a more serious degree with Warren Moon. If you Google Warren Moon controversy, all right, I'm not gonna sit here and like relitigate their respective controversies. I will allow you all listening to Google their controversies yourselves. But the fun that we had, okay, like the to be VIP, all right, and I was glad to be sitting there with Sean Pendergast and his lovely wife Amy, uh, with Boss Parker, his lovely wife, Tyler Milner, T Mills in the building, the producer of the afternoon show. But Ron Hughley was also there with his wife Courtney. We sat there, and it was cool to be able to walk through all of that, and then sit down next to Ron And then he and I have like these side conversations that I feel like only two black folks would have. And Courtney was in on a little bit of it too, his wife. We were basically three black people in this room who were not athletes, who were in this room full of most of the only black folks in here are the athletes, who were just having these side conversations like black folks do. And it was fun. It was fun shenanigans. Whenever a Hall of Fame inductee would come up, Lance Berkman comes up, Google his controversies. And the conversation with me and Ron was something like, hey, didn't he say such and such about such and such? Wasn't they on his ass about what he said about them people? Wasn't they mad because that man had an opinion? An opinion that he probably should have kept to himself? Would have been better off keeping to himself? And in some ways, I think you could argue or some problematic elements to the opinion. I don't want to minimize that. But Google the controversy and just imagine the side giggling conversation that me and Ron are able to have all the way in the back, kind of outside the fray. Then Cynthia Cooper. She's got controversy. All right. And like I said, who's to say the veracity or how much or what and blah, blah, blah. Who knows who said, she said, or what said, right? But the controversy is out there. You can imagine the fun that Ron and I had with that. What she say to them girls? Why them girls say she said that? Why them girls talk about that is wild. Why would she say that? Why would she say that? And why would they say she said that if she didn't say that? Ooh, something is off. Something is not right. Something is not good going on there. Something is foul. Had fun with that. And then Warren Moon's thing was less fun. All right. Because the controversy there, if you Google it, is well, I don't know. I mean, maybe none of them should be considered fun. This was dark humor. All right. That's the moral of the story, man. Me and Ron Hughley got to kick it and have some dark humor about the very worthy, esteemed Hall of Fame inductees, Lance Berkman, Cynthia Cooper, and Warren Moon. And we were glad for them. And we were glad for messy nonsense to contribute to our shenanigans as we reveled in just being at this event that's kind of a work event, but we not really working. We here at an open bar talking smack about athletes that are right there on stage, but all in good fun. All in good fun. Like the show, basically doing the show, because this thing's on TV, right? Ron and I basically doing the show that no one would be allowed to do, hiding in plain sight. It was, and I don't think I even told Ron this, how fun it was doing that, but it was a time. It was a time. All right. Now, next time we talk, unless something crazy happens, will be when I'm in Las Vegas. I'm going to be there for Radio Row with Sports Radio 610. And I'm not exactly sure what that episode is going to look like, what that pod is going to look like yet. But I'm looking forward to it because I'll be out there with all my Sports Radio 610 teammates, all my remaining Sports Radio 6 teammates, right? And you know what? I'll get John on this podcast at some point. I didn't feel like it was, now was the time, but I'd love to get John on here and just chop it up with him. I think he'd do that if I asked him. But I'm gonna wait. I'm gonna, ask him at an appropriate time to do that. But next week, Las Vegas, Radio Row. Make sure y'all are checking out everything that we're doing on the Sports Radio 610 social media fronts, right? The YouTube, the Twitch, live streaming the shows, the podcast, of course, the Odyssey app, all of that, the website, doing all of that, the social medias, like I mentioned. We're going to be having a really good time. We're going to be out there having a really good time. I'm real interested to see what it's going to look like with all of us out there for a damn week. Everybody got their own room. They sending us out there. Well, we're going to be out there. Y'all see that we out there. All right. So I can't wait to see what more shenanigans might ensue with the Sports Radio 610 crew. And I will bring at least some version of it to you here on the B Block podcast. I appreciate y'all for being here. Also, make sure that y'all are locked into the H-Town Hoops podcast. It's a separate podcast that I do on the Rockets. I will be recording one of those with Adam Spillane before I get out of here, before I fly out of here to Vegas over the weekend. So before the week is over with, we will have a Rockets podcast up for y'all on H-Town Hoops podcast. Make sure y'all are subscribed to that channel as well. Make sure y'all are subscribed, liking, rating, reviewing, and telling people about the B Block podcast as well. We do this every Wednesday and sometimes a little in between. But for now, that's all. Until next time, y'all be good.